we've all been waiting for. We have some wonderful special guests tonight. David and Kiara from Above Duality. The YouTube link is in the chat. Putting it up now. There we are. And wonderful friends. David is an entrepreneur, experiencer, and co-founder of the Age of Pandora podcast. With a military background and family ties to British intelligence, he has spent the majority of his life in the study of the esoteric truths largely held back from the general populace. Quietly living two lives, David has been on the front line of building and growing a number of companies across the world, wireless in the background, pursuing a fascination with the secret space program that began in 2009. Staging a walk away from his traditional businesses in early 2018, he now runs Above Duality full-time, a platform for delivering cosmic truths to the masses. Through the Age of Pandora podcast, he and co-founder Kiara Winrider spend their time interviewing some of the biggest names in the Great Awakening community. Indeed. David, welcome. Hello.
Thank you, Philip. And I'll just sit up a bit here so you can see me. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been on a couple of CC calls before. Thank you to all the CC coordinators who are doing what you're doing. I know what it's like organizing large groups of people, let alone in a time like this. I think we've got a very significant full moon tonight. Many of you are probably aware of that, but it's a pleasure to be here. I'm sure we're going to get into a wonderful conversation. My brother of light and Age of Pandora co-host Kiara is obviously with us, and we're just, I'm sure he'll chat in a second here, but just blessed to be with you. Thank you for having us. Thank you for having us on.
Thank you, David. Thank you for being here. This is absolutely amazing. Kiara Winrider is an author, healer, and therapist. He spent much of his early life traveling and practicing various spiritual traditions in India. A lifelong interest in peace and environmental awareness led to a dual degree in peace studies and international development through Bethel College, North Newton, Kansas. Later, he completed a graduate program in the transpersonal counseling psychology through JFK University in California, and worked for many years at an alternative psychiatric center called Pocket Ranch Institute, which specialized in healing emotional trauma and facilitating spiritual emergence. He has also worked extensively with survivors of satanic ritual abuse and CIA mind control. He has received a psychotherapy license from the state of California in 1988, and he is also trained in various forms of bodywork, breathwork, hypnotherapy, and shamanic healing. Kiara is an avid science researcher, exploring connections between galactic cycles, climate change, ancient history, quantum physics, human behavior, and spiritual awakening. Kiara, of course, is the co-host along with David at the Age of Pandora weekly podcast, which seeks to awaken people to their evolutionary destiny as a multi-dimensional human species. Kiara, welcome.
Thank you, Philip. It's great to meet all of you in this roundtable format. So looking forward to where we go today. It's just such an exciting time to be present here on this earth.
Absolutely. And it's funny. One of my opening lines here is we are in such a significant time, so significant, in fact, that so much healing is going on right now. And that is a huge topic, a huge theme that's been going on in connecting consciousness, that's been going on in lots of different kinds of circles. Kiara, if we can start with you, what is your vision of healing in the now and in the near future as we move forward into 5D and beyond?
Wow. Well, I think that question covers everything. Just being present with who we are and recognizing that what we are is much more than what we think we are, because we've been conditioned for so long to be just much less than what we are designed to be. So it's like connecting with our human design, with our divine design, coming into harmony with all the different aspects of our being, emotional, physical, spiritual, mental, and converging together in some way, where we can also join with Gaia as a living consciousness. I think our separation from each other, our separation from this earth, has been a choice we've made over thousands of years, and we are unmaking that choice right now in so many ways. There seems to be a global awakening, and it's in confrontation with the forces that we call dark. So this whole idea of a battle between dark and light is actually what's helping us awaken. And so rather than fighting against the darkness, recognizing that the darkness is here as a tool for us to awaken, if we can be present and mindful in the midst of it. So just awareness is key. And of course, preparing our bodies for the frequencies that are coming in now, because inevitably this is a time that Gaia is awakening as a planetary consciousness. And we are invited to awaken with her. But whether we do or not, and to whatever extent we do, it's Gaia's journey. And, it's such a privilege to be part of that and to assimilate the new frequencies that are coming in. So part of what healing is for me is also to prepare our bodies for this next wave of cosmic energy that's coming in. And it's coming in for sure. This is something I've been really exploring lately, the galactic cosmic cycles and how they impact on solar planetary cycles and the change of this age. Some people talk about the Aquarian age, the age of light, Satyuga. All of this are just metaphors for preparing ourselves for this, to become guardians of this earth and to truly recognize who we are. What we've been doing with Age of Pandora is basically exploring those questions. Who am I? What am I? Why am I? And then looking at where we're going in relation to where we've come from. And then journey together and find each other and support each other and move together on this beautiful planet. I mean, that's just an overview, and there's so many different pieces we can
No,
get
that's
into.
amazing. That's a wonderful opening. David, what are your thoughts on where we're going with healing and where we should be going with healing as we move through these kinds of dark forces versus light forces and the storm that's going on? How do we remain calm and heal ourselves during this time?
Can't we go home after Kiara's answer? Welcome to my world.
We could probably wrap it up, but that might be a little anticlimactic for everyone else.
Welcome to my world on the Age of Pandora podcast. Kiara just says all that needs to be said. Well, it's a crazy time, isn't it? Like Kiara said, it's a big topic, healing. And I wanted to mention one thing before I maybe go into a little bit more depth again from my side, is that we talk about 5D a lot. And we don't talk about 4D very much. And we're breaking the ice with the seal, breaking the ice in springtime right now in the Arctic, and poking our heads from the 3rd density up into the 4th. And make no mistake about it, my friends, we've got to go through the 4th density to get to the 5th. Now, the journey from the 4th to the 5th is a lot different than the 3rd to the 4th, as many of you know. It's a lot more accelerated and lots of different elements involved, but it's kind of the elephant in the room for me right now is no one's talking about the 4th density and breaking through that 4th sort of astrally contained and run dimension. This is where we're at, and this is why the healing is so front and center, because that astral realm kind of represents a lot of that healing, I think, for many of us, and not just our individual side of healing, which I'll talk about in a moment. But we're also, some of us, and probably most people here, if not everyone here, has agreed contractually before they incarnated here in this vessel in this lifetime to take on some of the planetary karma. All the way back to Atlantis, there is a lot of etheric pain and hurt and negativity that has followed the human genome, the human incarnation or incarnated journey to where we are now. And that's why a lot of you are feeling, as I am regularly, on balance, off balance, anxious, not anxious, being woken up at 3:33 in the morning, etc. Difficult dreams, deep dreams, and all this stuff, lots more. It's a combination of our own individual healing and also the agreement that we've made to heal some of the planetary karma. And boy, is that a big responsibility. But I think, and I've got a live show going on after this one tonight, which I'm going to talk about this a little bit more on, but the beauty of humanity is never before is it more important to realize how beautiful the human journey actually is. And I know for part of my entrepreneurial journey, I ignored a lot of the healing, a lot of the trauma, a lot of the negativity that I needed to address from the mistakes that I was making and had made, and the inner child work that we all bring with us from childhood. All of us bring that major childhood healing that we need. And some more than others, some go through horrible things in that childhood period to heal all kinds of things and for various reasons, soul contracts and other. And the human journey is, especially in this particular seeding of the human race, I think we're in number 3, is that we're in enlightenment through disharmony, right? So that is, we get to, if you look at the Hawkins scale, the top of that is enlightenment, but we get to that place of joy, bliss, enlightenment through disharmony. And we keep forgetting that that is one of the beauties of the human journey. And we went through this on Tuesday's podcast, Kiara and I, with wonderful Nicole Frolick. And there are queues of souls, there are lines of souls who didn't get to incarnate at this time, who didn't make it down. And for some of you, that sounds crazy because you kind of want to get back up. But I can tell you, if you did right now, you'd want to get back down as soon as possible. And it's just the ego, the mental body that blocks the galactic view of that. So the healing journey is very, very interesting. And it does contain lots of different directions and facets. And I think the key is, I look to nature, and as Kiara talks about so often, and you can hear the wonderful birds in Kiara's background there when he talks from India, where he is. And I look to nature for a couple of things when it comes to healing. And one is that it is a very brutal process, but it's a graceful process. And there's a lot of allowance there, isn't there? There's a lot of, when things need to be regrown, when trees shed their leaves, all this stuff in nature, you can go through 100 examples, is that nature does it. Nature does it gracefully. And quite often, especially right now, there's a lot of talk of shadow work. You've got to focus on shadow work. Well, no, you don't at all. You've got to focus on the light, and the shadow work will present itself very gracefully. And if you don't address it, it will keep coming up. But I think there's a forceful element to the mental body, the egoic nature, sort of our personality, which we're extricating right now as we move into higher dimensional bodies that Kiara was talking about. There's a forceful element that we've created, that man and woman has created, to think that we have to do it now, we have to heal now, we've got to do it all at once, put it in the mixing bowl, put it in the oven, let's bake the cake. And the reality of that on the ground, as many of you know, is just not the case. And so my final closing thought on the topic of healing, at least, is to not necessarily move into addressing healing, but move into the allowance for it to present itself. And in doing that, it will do that naturally when it's ready to do so. And if it doesn't, then it will come up at the right time. And it's kind of, one of our sovereign invocations, if you like. It's not Saint Germain, I can't remember where it's from, but is to let go of all expectations and forceful ideas about your ascension. Now, that's quite hard to do because it's right in our face right now, isn't it? But to let go and let God more and allow the process of healing to come, and it will. So I think that's, again, we could talk a lot more on that, but that's my commentary on that, Philip, my man.
No, that was beautiful. So much to take away from there. The one word though that really just kind of stood out to me, and it was, of course, was a little towards the end. Allowance. Just that state of being is, I think, so hard for, I know myself. It's just to allow things to happen, and to allow yourself to feel, and to heal, and to allow all the stuff that's going on around you to pass by. Just sitting in that allowance, sitting in that kind of knowing of like, yeah, I've agreed to come here, and just sit in those kinds of feelings of we are moving forward through, like you said, 4D, through into 5D and beyond. And there are steps that are going to we have to take to get there. They don't always look nice. They don't always feel nice, but that is all part of this process. Like you said, there's so many examples. I thought the nature was a great example, because you see it mirrored in the seasons so strongly every year, every day. We see this, the shedding and the birth and all of these things that are emulated through us. And we are doing that as well. And if we have that same peace as when we're sitting out there camping, or just being out in nature and listening to the sounds and listening, I don't know about anybody, you, but when I'm out there camping, and I can hear the wind through the trees, and like you can watch the current in the water. It's like being that, and just kind of letting yourself flow with that as well. Super important, just to allow during this time. We have a question for Kiara from Louise. Does a person born with does a person born a shaman, or does a person does the person be discovered with the years of working it's his own path?
Yeah, good question. Well, certainly we are all born as shamans, and as potential. Because to me, what shaman means is someone who's simply open to the forces of nature, who's open to the upper worlds and what that means in the world of spirit, to the lower worlds, which is the world of nature and biology. So we're born into nature. We're born into Gaia. Gaia is the one, the Divine Mother, operating through the consciousness of this planet, who has invited us here. So certainly, we are all shamans. There's a process of recognition, and I think this is what we're going through right now. And I think that's what David was talking about, that forcefulness versus allowance. In many indigenous cultures, there's an allowance of connection with the earth, with the forces of the earth, just being in nature, like you mentioned, Philip, letting the winds of spirit pass through you without resistance. And I think primarily it's that resistance and that attachment, both, which keep us from being fully present, which keep us from unfolding what we truly are. So it's not so much about forcing, but unfolding. So it's like as we unfold, we recognize that we're already connected through all these different dimensions, all these different worlds and realities, all these different levels of the mind, because it's much more than just the rational mind that we are dealing with. And as we learn to open up to these other levels of the mind, these other levels of consciousness, and different spaces within our biology, then that just happens naturally. So yes, there are skills that we can learn, Um, but it's not like we have to force anything. The Inca practices that I've been working with are examples of this. It's the idea that we're living in this beautiful universe that's flowing in its own way at all times. We can choose to either go with the flow, surrender to the flow, or resist the flow. And it's that resistance to flow that keeps us trapped in the box, in the duality, in the matrix, and that fear where we are afraid to live our divinity, whatever that means, to explore that vastness of space and time, which is our true nature. So whatever labels we use, whatever names we call, this presence or this shamanic realm, um, it's our first nature actually. Being in this disguise of humanness is our second nature. Um, David talked about ascension, this opening to the fourth and then the fifth and higher dimensions. It could just be as equally real to talk about descension. So it's like we are this infinite consciousness, the one spirit of life. And we are descending into human form. We're descending into human functioning as a planetary citizen, uh, but not letting go of who we already are. And what we already are, who we truly are, is spirit. So in that recognition of spirit, we are shamans. The name shaman is actually a little overused, because it seems to represent this mystery and magical mastery. There's all these stories that go with it. But we are each in our own story. We are each in our own journey of life. How do we make our own life magical? How do we make our own life profound? How do we make our own life count at this time when we're going through so much? David talked about going through the fourth dimension to enter the fifth dimension. The fourth dimension is our resistance. It's what the Inca shamans talk about, hucha. So flow is sami, when you're in the flow of the universe. When you're resisting the flow, that's hucha. And we've become so comfortable with hucha, we've become so conditioned that this is the way it is and has to be for all of us, that we forget who we truly are. So it's that remembrance of who we truly are that allows us to be on the path of the shaman. Carlos Castaneda talks about this, for those of you who are old enough to remember. He talks about following the path with heart. It's the most difficult thing and it's the most simple thing.
Absolutely it is. No, absolutely is. And what I was picking up was, obviously the river flows forward, it doesn't flow backward. So really be the river, flowing forward, never stopping, just being pure, always moving towards the open ocean, where you can be fully expansive. And I love a couple of things there. I loved, we're all born shamans, but the label of shaman, obviously we have all these different labels of like different people, and whether they're gurus or light workers or what have you, all labels for people that are spiritual, that are in tune with all of these kinds of levels on these journeys, working towards these kinds of positive consequences. And it's us watching on the outside, watching this kind of happen, and when we can grab a hold of that as well, and be those shamans, be whatever label that we want to be, as long as it resonates with us. super good about that. You were touching on this a little bit there, but there is a question here. How do we, from Raymond, how do we allow the process to be its destiny when the internet media sites and are pushing our emotional reaction to do action, like protest, wake up maybe when we're not ready to wake up, perhaps, etc. David?
Oh, damn. I thought Kiara had that one.
Yeah, we'll give Kiara a little bit of a break.
Well, you know, each person has to decide their own journey in this ascension. Everyone's going to be different. And may it be all aligned to the divine plan of humanity. What's good for all is good. And as many of you are, as I always say, I and we are working with a number of ascended masters right now, and I'm quite deep in studying a number of those teachings. So that's my anchor. That's my baseline. That's my my lightning rod, whatever you want to call it. That's my center point that I judge everything else or analyze everything else around. And at this time, the thing that I try and talk about, we haven't really brought this up on the Age of Pandora yet so much, but is SMS. Now, not the digital version, but the spiritual version, which is study, meditation, and service. And that's the path of enlightenment, really, I suppose, mastery, if you want to call it that. They're one and the same. But there's what you'll notice about those three things as a path of the master or a path of ascension is that there's two elements to those three things. Okay, there is doing and there is being, and you'll get plenty of the being in the etheric realms, in the soul realms, in the higher dimensions, but that's not why you're here right now. You're here to bring awareness and importance back to the human genome, this real Godhead potential incarnate that we are, which is going to be a journey that we're on. But there's a play, there's a balance, there's a dance to be had with this journey, and it is in between and in the doing and being. And so what do I do? How do I do? You know, that is all egoic questioning, trying to gain security from knowing the outcome. That's not presence, that's not allowance. But having said that, in the human form, there is a play between those two. So the study, meditation, and service for me is my study of the teachings of the masters, certainly the angelic realms, the ancient teachings from where I find them from, the meditation of that, the sort of the real unpacking of that material, the connection to source, the connection to God within, Christ within, infinite intelligence, to unwrap that a little bit. And then the service. Now, service is I think can be a noun, but it's also a verb. More importantly, in this element, it's a verb. And the service can be lots of different things. So let's break it down in terms of the question. You know, what do we do when the media is, and these platforms that we've created, you watching this and listening to this and me speaking, we've created, and now we're dissolving. But the service is really case by case. So for example, and the service I talk about is service to the divine spark, central spark within, and the divine plan of humanity. That's the service component, which can take many different formats depending on the situation. So that's very specific. So for example, let's take here in Calgary, let's take the crazy COVID camps that I was locked up in a couple of weeks ago, and this is going on all over Canada. In fact, you can get into this space of fear and not knowing what to do. But let's go back SMS. Let's study what's happening. Let's meditate on what's happening, and then let's find out in this particular subject, in service, what's the best thing I can do right now to serve the divine plan of humanity? Is it to go out on the street and protest? Is it to stay home and meditate and talk to Joshua Ben Joseph or one of the Ascended Masters, and that's very specific to each subject. So it has to be, for me, that way in order to gain divine intelligence, divine guidance on the path for that subject. But the simple answer to the media side of things is, here's the way the deep state and the dark force, I call them the DF, the dark forces work, my friends, is that they have especially when it comes to their manipulation of humanity. I'm talking about the esoteric side of the dark forces, sort of the dark magic, the people who really know about spirituality on the dark side. They know us better than many of us know ourselves. Maybe not this group, but sort of maybe the sleeping masses. Is that they will say, okay, we want this outcome. They know that we can create that through our conscious attention. Now, what they will do is they'll have that outcome there, and they'll say, okay, well, that's the outcome we want. I'm talking about the highest levels of the dark forces. Let's put that out through the media, through all the social platforms, all the digital stuff that we see. And guess what we do? We go and create it by giving it our attention. And so the beautiful thing is, and we've talked about this on previous shows, is with this particular element, to know the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is inevitable. We're all going to go through pain, but suffering is optional. And suffering is when we feel that powerless feeling that we're not in control, which of course is absolute nonsense. So the control we have as it comes to the media sources and things like that is just to not give it our attention. It's an obvious answer, and a lot of you know that. But that which is likened to itself is drawn. It's a simple law of the universe. And by not giving it its attention, we go to the story of the native elders with the juniors sitting around the campfire, the two wolves story. Which one do you feed? You probably all know that. I won't tell the story. And there's love and there's fear. Which one do you feed? So which one are we feeding? Are we feeding what we want to create, or are we feeding what people are telling us to create? And the moment en masse we stop doing this, we transform the planet, really. And we're starting to get there. And you'll see in the future as this deep state, this dark force, which is going to, unfortunately, my friends, it's going to take a long time to dissolve, which is okay. But as it gets more and more dissolved, we'll get together in these Ubuntu communities and the communities that Kiara may talk about today, or we'll talk about in later episodes, that are going on all over the planet. These new earth communities will sit together in mass meditation, and we'll create stuff that we can't even begin to imagine right now. And that's where we're going. But get around the campfire and just decide what you want to feed, and study meditation and service, and just slow down, breathe like Philip was so beautifully leading us into at the beginning there, and listen to the divine, and it will guide you in the right direction.
Yeah, the breath in when I was trying to do my lessons and learn about meditation, it really comes really down to the breath. We are feeding ourselves, we are feeding oxygen into our system. When we're not breathing properly, our bodies aren't working properly, and we're going to be more agitated, we're going to be anxious, we're going to be frustrated. So taking moments when we are engaging in the things that we've created to take a step back and breathe is just so important. Or when we're having a difficult time, remember just to breathe. It seems, again, we talk about some simple things, it seems very elementary things, but even as adults, we lose it from our minds when we're in the storm. And it's so important that we just kind of check in and breathe, please. You were speaking a little bit of the DF. We have a DF question. If the DF has been around for thousands of years, what impact does it have on our previous lives? Kiara?
Yeah. Well, before answering that, just to comment on what you said about breathing, we need to remember that breathing includes breathing in and breathing out. Sometimes we try and breathe in too much, and then it's like, we're holding all this breath inside us with no place to go. The release of breath is just as important as the intake. And what does that mean? It means giving ourselves a break when needed, because that's what the universe is also about. The universe goes through cycles of in-breath and out-breath. And we can't always be giving out. And I think that's where we get tired. It's about that discernment of where we need to be right now, and that dance between the being and the doing, where we can be fully functional in the flow, because the flow includes both. It's not just one or the other. So in terms of the deep state, extending through thousands of years, that's also a part of the same question, because what we call the deep state, we call it by so many different names. We can just call it the dark forces, not as something evil, but as a mirror, as something that can teach us about ourselves. When David talked about needing to go through the fourth dimension to get to the fifth dimension, this is the mirror. When we talk about being the shaman, we can also talk about being the alchemist. And what the alchemist does is it takes the darkness, transforms it into light. It's not resisting the darkness, fighting the darkness, overcoming the darkness. It's about entering into the darkness to discover that is just an aspect of light. And then in that discovery, in that allowance, we become something beyond the duality of darkness and light. Because in the third dimension, there's a duality aspect. So then the dark forces are extremely dark, the light forces are extremely light. We identify with one or the other, and then we project something, what we don't like onto the other. And that's the nature of darkness on this planet so far. It's always in opposition to what we consider light. So there's aspects of us that we like. We refer to them as light. There's aspects to ourselves that we don't like, which we refer to as dark. Same goes for other people, other circumstances around us. So alchemy is to actually shine the light on what is dark inside us, to unveil the potential there. So when we look at the deep state, through all the different incarnations of this, in Sumerian times, in Greco-Roman periods, in the Arabic conquests, and the Catholic inquisitions, and everything that's been going on this last century with the world wars, and with the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Bilderbergers, all this that we currently name the deep state. It's no different from our age-old process of learning to enter into the heart of darkness, embrace it, and then transform it. That's the journey into the fifth dimension. That's the journey through the fourth dimension, entering into the heart of darkness, not by confronting, but not by needing to overcome it in a violent way, but by seeing that there's aspects of us that have been projected out there for such a long time that we have created an otherness. And then we separate between what's inside and what's outside. So being a shaman, going back to that first question, is to recognize that there's no outside or inside. Dissolving that boundary that has held us back from seeing ourselves as the universe. And there's no denying that, because we think about fifth dimension from third dimensional perspectives. And we can't get there, by using the same mindset. The fifth dimensional mindset goes beyond duality, or begins to go beyond duality. And so here we have a different relationship with darkness. As we go even further, into sixth, seventh, these are names that we use. I don't know exactly what fifth, sixth, seventh dimensional means. I think we are multidimensional, really. And it's about holding all those frequencies simultaneously, just like we can hold the different brain frequencies simultaneously: alpha, beta, theta, delta, gamma. It's not like having to be one or the other. We can hold all of it simultaneously because we are multidimensional beings, descended masters, ascended masters, same old thing. But it's really about becoming ourselves fully, without resistance, without fear. And once we learn how to deal with fear, I think that's the key. Because what we have done with, as soon as we hear the word deep state, immediately there's a sense of fear. Oh my God, it's like this whole, um, this, this sea of darkness out there, and we're powerless to deal with it because that's how we are conditioned. We are conditioned to be small. We're conditioned to be powerless. We're conditioned to be insignificant. Um, and that conditioning is what keeps us small. It's what keeps us victimized. And to learn how to be masters is to also recognize that this whole cycle of perpetrator victimization has to go. Being masters mean that we're not defining ourselves as a victim, just as much as not defining ourselves as being a perpetrator. And yes, we hear all these stories, and it's difficult to hear those stories. And when I worked as a psychotherapist, working with people who are severely traumatized and wounded and hurt by satanic abuse and ritual abuse and CIA mind control, dualistic mindset, fuck you guys. How dare you do this to other human beings? And, how do we deal with that? It's not easy. When you first hear those stories, you can't help but be hurt and wounded yourself. How can humans do this to each other? And yet, forgiveness, love, compassion, in the midst of that is what takes us into the fifth dimension. So all of this is like the training that we are given as alchemists to enter our multidimensional mastery. And then we have a mission here on this earth. And what is that mission? That mission is to enter into a realm that's never been entered before, is to enter into a phase of evolution that we have not been able to achieve yet, where we can join with Gaia, join every species of life on this planet and beyond, within the earth, above the earth, beyond the earth, and to co-create something as divine consciousness that's not been done before. So letting go of all the ideas and expectations of how it should be, how we should be, what the past is about, what the future is about, to just surrender to something beyond that wants to use us, move through us. And in doing so, what I find that our ideas of who we are, our belief systems, are the hardest to relinquish, because those belief systems and ideas of who we are actually get in the way of what we are becoming. And that's maybe the hardest thing of all, even our spiritual ideas. I am a spiritual being, this is what it means. I'm moving towards this is what it means. These are the emotions I go through, and I tend to identify with some and reject others. All these come from ideas of spirituality. Whereas to truly overcome, I'm using overcome in quotes from a three-dimensional perspective, to truly overcome the darkness, the deep state, means to simultaneously also hold already what we are becoming. We're becoming something, but we already are that. And then we're becoming a different place in the spiral. So maybe I'll share a story. I've shared this before in one of our Age of Pandora broadcasts. The first time I was in Egypt, this was at least 15 years ago, I was really eager to connect with the Egyptian deities, the gods and the goddesses, the nethers, as they're called. They're psychological archetypes. So they're not just being separate from us, they're also aspects of us. And so I went through this phase where I was really connecting with Osiris and Isis and Horus and Sekhmet and Hathor and, all these beautiful archetypes. And then one day I realized, what about Seth? Because Seth is supposed to be this god representing darkness and evil, war. And yes, I was terrified of having to face him. But I realized that in order to truly become an alchemist and a master, this was necessary. So not looking at Seth as just a third dimensional entity, but looking at the multidimensionality. The universe is creating something beneficial through all of these different players. And so when I connected with Seth, I was expecting to find this really, dark, mean, crazy energy. And what I found was someone who was deeply compassionate, but stern. And the sternness came through as, you guys, wake up. For so long, you've projected all your darkness on other people, on circumstances, on the deep state, on other gods and goddesses, on other archetypal realms outside of you. But how about if you face yourself and discover that you're beyond the duality? And as long as you're projecting, I am stepping in to hold that darkness for you. And so, this archetype is created. But it's time for humanity to grow up now. It's time for you to mature. You are no longer adolescents, playing in this game of good and evil and projecting, denying, suppressing aspects of yourself. So that was such a gift to me to have that communication with Seth. So remember, I'm not talking about the third dimensional version of Seth. I'm talking about this archetypal realm that we can all learn from. Because I don't want to get into this dark and light thing where one aspect of energy is supposed to be evil, another is supposed to be good. We're here to master, and we're here to create something that's not been seen before. And so this is what we need to go through. This is what alchemy is about. We're here to experience the gold during this particular time in history, with all the chaos that we are seeing, what we are going through, especially since November 3rd, when we had certain expectations of how we would overcome the deep state, how Trump would, basically take the mantle of the White Knight and do what was necessary to overcome. And what we're learning is that it's not as easy as that. We are the White Knights, all of us. And we're all taking on that mantle in our own little ways, but coming from a place of mastery and divinity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You spoke a lot about this kind of process, but we have a question for David about what can we expect in the 4D. Kiara, you were touching on all those wonderful things in there. David, can you wrap it up in a nice bow for Louise?
No. Probably not. I'm terrible at rapping, by the way. You shouldn't have asked me that. hey, look, disappointment is the gap between expectation and reality. And the reason that we were so disappointed about November, about January, about February, about probably the April dates coming up, is because we're expecting something to happen, aren't we? So the expectation element often gets confused with creation, because in the law of attraction realm, in the realm of maybe Louise Hay and Wayne Dyer and Abraham Hicks and all these interesting public figures teaching some good stuff and some interesting stuff, is that they talk about expectation a lot. Expect this and it will happen. And we think that's manifestation. And whilst that in some degree is, with regards to white magic and alchemy, is the case, the creation element of a reality is actually quite different from expectation. And we've got that confused quite a bit. I know I have, I know we have. So when it comes to the sort of the fourth density, I don't think that you won't suddenly wake up and go, oh, we're in 4D. Okay, here we go. It's going to continue to transcend the intellect. You know, the journey that we're on will transcend the intellect more and more and more and more. Why? Because we're extricating the intellect, and the goal is never to get rid of the ego. That's a falsity in my view, my opinion. The goal is to love the ego into submission, and that's alchemy. That's a dissolving process. So, with regards to, maybe let's talk about the physical reality of what I think we'll experience in 4D. Well, there's kind of three layers to it. There's the lower, there's the up, there's the middle, and there's the upper. And then there's, higher realms. And it could take 50 years, it could take 5 years, it could take 1,000 years. So let's not put an expectation on how long it should take. And maybe there'll be different waves of humanity. We just don't know. So the allowance of this, again, is so important. The being in presence to be able to allow these things to happen and unfold in their right time. As when nature happens, the trees don't question them getting rid of their leaves. It just happens. And that's a soft, beautiful principle that we need to continually remember. I need to continue to remind myself. So I think what we'll continue to experience is, and to talk about the DF sort of finally, the dark forces, I like to invite people to see the dark forces as humanity's trauma, okay, which in many degrees is actually true. Now, if we look at the dark forces as trauma, we can look at it from love or from fear, right? Now, what do you need to do to heal trauma? Well, every part of trauma is very different, but essentially is you need to go into the wound, you need to face it head on, man in the mirror moment, holy SHIT. That was the first time I heard Kiara swear, by the way. It's a special day. We'll talk about that later, my friend. But you got to face it, and then if you're very practiced at it, you see nothing but God in that, right? That's how Jeshua would heal. He'd go into the wound, he'd see nothing but God, and stand, my brother, you are now healed. And that's how we heal trauma at the purest, most advanced form, mental and emotional trauma I'm talking about. And the same is actually true of physical trauma. But we'll see more heightened levels of ESP. Okay, we'll see more advancements of telepathy, more advancements of quantum healing, telekinesis, biolocation, astral travel and projection, telekinesis, you name it. The X-Men powers, if you want to call them that. And I think the most important thing is that it's gradual. Because when you think about it, if you got a dose of 10,000 past lives right now, how hard would that be to take, this physical vessel? It would be quite challenging for every human being on the planet, pretty much. So let's embrace this journey into the the lower half of 4D, which is going to be more of this healing. I think, and I've got a show on this after, General Flynn's interview recently, which I know we all saw, the wonderful, amazing General Flynn, is that he did a wonderful thing. He reminded us, let's look at this from sort of the 10,000 foot view that we always talk about, the cosmic view. General Flynn reminded us to not forget that no one's coming to save us. No one's coming to save us, guys. We are the creation of the new earth. We are the ascension. Hashtag. Now, are the white hats and the alliance and the military doing things behind the scenes? Well, it seems to be quite clear that they are, but we're not there yet. And we are a huge part of this plan. So when General Flynn said that, and everyone went, what? There is no plan, and the military is not in control. Of course, it wasn't a truth for obvious reasons. Most of us here know why that was. That brought up a lot more trauma for people. Maybe not trauma, but it brought up a lot more realization to the fact, need to get back in the mirror here and continue on this path. So this is part of the 4D transition room right now. Now, I think it's going to be a challenging time, but a beautiful time moving through the first half of the fourth density, which we're sort of going through now, I believe. And I don't pretend to be some kind of master and know what this is all about. Like Kiara said, the more and more I learn, the more and more I learn that I don't know anything at all. It's quite overwhelming, in fact. But as we break through this first layer of the fourth density, we'll have to do a lot of this healing and realization that I'm talking about now, and much more individually and as a collective, to start to put on that next layer of dissolution to the structures that are being controlled. And we're going to get Michael Tellinger on quite shortly with the Age of Pandora podcast, and there's many other people doing this. Part of the plan of the new earth is we're not just going to be able to build new communities and leave it there, and that's going to be the shining light, and that's going to dissolve everything. That's part of it. We're going to have to go in. When I shared that 9/11 story, when I talked to some of the first responders in 9/11, that terrible false flag, where a lot of people unfortunately did die, is when everyone was running out of the buildings, the first responders and emergency services ran in. And there's going to be a portion of us light bearers, it doesn't have to be you listening to this, but I bid you to think about this, is there is a layer of the Great Awakening community that needs to go in, that needs to go into the politics, that needs to go into the controlled structures, that needs to go into the tunnel with reptilians, etc. Maybe don't do that by yourself. And stare at it in the face, bring in the Christ light and dissolve it from within. And not in an aggressive way. Force and power, two very different things. Force is man-made. Power is from God. God doesn't force. God is power. That's true power. And so this is the journey up into the upper levels of the lower levels of the fourth density, the next level of living. And we're going to see a lot of this, I think, as we get through this this period, which could take a long time, or it could be quick. And I think it'll take longer than we want it to. But as we get into that, we'll see these extrasensory perceptions that many of you, I know I am, are starting to see the lights come on right now. We're starting to have these experiences with higher dimensional beings show up. We're starting to have these experiences with ETs and all kinds of stuff. Some of the stuff that's happened to me is quite extraordinary, but it's not. It's just reality. We're just forgetting what we've, as Kiara said, forgetting what we've been programmed to believe, and remembering who we are. And as we poke our head as the seals up through the fourth density, there are all kinds of new beings and things in there going, oh, there's a seal. Well, let's go and take a look at them, right? And they can be dark and light. But so that's sort of an overview of my answer. I think we're going to see a lot more esoteric things happen. You're going to see a lot more what you would call high strangeness, but is not. It's just moving through a different density, different dimension, different things actually, but different density. And learning how to hone our skills of telepathy and telekinesis, all this stuff, learning how to control that. As I remember when the X-Men movies, when they sort of first get their powers, I know one I watched recently was Cyclops, when he first got his power, he shot that great red beam out and took down, destroyed a tree and whatever at the Xavier's school. But we're going to learn how to control these things more and we're going to make contact with higher beings that are more first contact, if you want to call it that, official first contact, more of a mass level, and that will become more well known. So there's multiple facets to it. I haven't covered everything with this description or this particular comment, but either way, I think it's a very, very exciting time, and we should be really looking forward to it.
Absolutely, absolutely, we should. Moving along, as even though the time is against us here, we have a question for Kiara. Pretty straight up, actually. Have you heard about the kingdom of mana?
No.
There you go. Okay, that we'll make it short and sweet. This is for either Kiara or David, but Kiara, since that was short and sweet, maybe you can take on this one. Are there different levels of awakening?
Yes. I'm reminded of something that Rumi says. He talks about 3 levels of awakening. He says the first level is when you identify as a drop separate from the great ocean. And then the drop dissolves into the ocean, and you begin to experience yourself as this immense universe. But that's only the second stage. And the third stage is when the entire ocean enters into the drop. So what that means basically for me is, the first stage, I'm experiencing myself separate from everything around me. I'm learning, I'm looking to integrate the big picture, even though I'm still seeing myself somehow separate and distinct. And then during a process of awakening, I open to that spirit of oneness. I enter into higher levels of the mind, higher dimensional possibilities. And I see myself, I experience myself as all of that, but that's not enough. The next stage is when I can allow, or I am that, expressing through human form. So my sense of identity has shifted. I'm no longer identified with the human self. I'm identified with the divine universal self. And that I am entering into human form to engage in whatever ways are necessary for the evolution of the earth. So most people, even when talking about enlightenment, stop at that second stage. But that third stage that's why I talk about descension, of involution. That's when we can really influence and affect the earth in a different way. So David earlier talked about the scale of consciousness from 0 to 1,000. Now we're talking about, close to 1,000. We were actually entering into the realm of human affairs, but with a deeper presence than ever before. So when we're talking about mastery, I think that's what it really means. It's recognizing that we're not just the human self, we're not just the universal self, but we're here to join. And it's a progression. So I don't think that it's, you're going through an event where you suddenly become enlightened or awakened or mystified or mysticized. It's a process, but every step along the way, there's initiations that we go through, and each initiation is memorable, and it's a personal as well as collective initiation. So the fact that we're going through this collective initiation right now, so when David talks about a lineup of people waiting to come in, it's because we're going through this collective initiation that's so profound. It happens once every 12,000 years, once every, galactic cycle. And there are many different aspects to this. There's the human aspect to this, what we're going through socially, collectively, politically. There's also the planetary aspect, where the magnetic fields are going through a tremendous reset. There's changes taking place on the sun. And energies which are providing new possibilities of creation that have not been seen before. So there's many, many different layers of this. So ultimately, when we're talking about awakening, it's personal, it's collective, it's planetary, it's galactic, cosmic, and there's aspects of us all the way through. I was looking through some of the earlier questions, and there's a question about the difference between dimensions and densities, and that relates to this also. Because density, it's the same thing, but from different perspectives. Density is in terms of third density, meaning physical, fourth density, meaning etheric, fifth density, meaning somehow entering into the astral and causal worlds. Whereas dimensions, we're talking about the entire spectrum of reality associated with those densities. So there's a mystic yogi seer in India, Sri Aurobindo, who lived during the last century, whom I consider one of my greatest teachers. And he spoke about the transition we're making from physical matter into what he called true matter. So we don't leave behind matter as we evolve into higher densities or higher dimensions, but our relationship with matter changes. The problem is not matter. The problem is how we conceive of matter, how we perceive matter. So when we enter into higher dimensional realities, our relationship with matter is different, and therefore we perceive matter differently, and matter correspondingly becomes more fluid, more plastic, more flexible, more permeable to the flow of spirit. So at that point, we can decide, okay, I want to travel to Hawaii. So what if there's a lockdown? I just shift my consciousness there and my physical body shows up. Because I've learned to use the properties of matter in a much more plastic way.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Kira. David, did you want to jump in and add to that?
That's a great explanation, Kiara. Really good. I've never actually heard dimensions and densities explained that way. I think you're right on, and I think we'll have another definition of it in 10 years. It will evolve, but I think that's as good as I can. Yeah, I think that covers it all. I mean, there was a quote here, and it was I can't remember who this was from. It wasn't from Nicole, from a great friend of mine, but it was from someone else. And it's, ascension is a complete metamorphosis. It shatters almost all your perceptions of what you know to be true. And someone had posted, and I think it was Kerry Cassidy's chat, I can't remember, it was one of the Telegram chats today, that in order for the caterpillar to go into the butterfly, it needs to go into this pulp. And the actual post was, if you feel yourself being a pulp right now, it's okay, you're right on track, which was kind of nice way to put it. But this is the getting into the more densities and dimensions. We're letting go of who we are, and we've got so much of our mental body which really is so attached to our emotional or our state of emotions. When that gets challenged, we get this emotional reaction, fear, because we feel like security is being removed, but it's not. It's a transformation, and that's what I think. I'd rather, because that, when you label something, that which is labeled is already limited. In the land of God, in the land of the infinite, that which is labeled is already limited. It's already finite. And of course, the only person that limits things is really man, to a large degree. And so rather than looking at it as sort of moving through densities, let's just look at it as moving through cycles of transformation. And I think that's sort of more of an easier pill and more of an easier definition to not have to worry about knowing too much about, right? We get excited about the transformation. We know God wins, hashtag, and to embrace the journey. A part of it is, unfortunately, we've got to get rid of this. We've got to transform this black dark forces spot on the planet, which may never go away. It may live alongside us for the next 1,000 years, but that doesn't mean that we're not moving to a golden age and that we can't live in absolute harmony. We don't really know what that's going to look like, and it's okay that we don't know. So looking at it from the aspect of transformation rather than getting to a place, it's the Kiara and I talked about the white knight syndrome. It's kind of I call it the checkered flag syndrome. It's like, oh, we've run the race, we've run the 100 meters. Well, now what? Well, now you train for the next race. Like is never a finish line, guys. We're infinite beings, and so the transformation is what's to be focused on and embraced, rather than saying, oh, now we're in the fourth density. It's just be in presence more and embrace the journey.
Absolutely. Speaking of not knowing what to expect in the future, we do have projects that there are going on all throughout the planet. You mentioned some of these new Earth projects. Kiara, do you want to speak to any of those?
So, well, David mentioned Ubuntu, Michael Tellinger. Similar to that, I'm working with a team of people in Europe right now, and the basic idea is to work with specific places, like physical locations, all over the earth. We have about a dozen different parcels of land right now. And the idea is to create model communities where we can mirror what we're talking about. What does that mean? What does it mean to have your own governance, to have your own economy, to have, a way of relating interpersonally that's harmonic, not hierarchical, and psychologically what's the name the word I'm looking for? Well, psychologically open. So we're not projecting and defending and all that. All of that takes maturity. So a sustainable lifestyle in terms of growing food, in terms of how we use power, in terms of building our light bodies as well. So it's not just on physical levels, but also working to gestate a new human being, a new human species, Homo luminous. So it's like these are little imaginal cells springing up in different places around the world, which then converge together to create a global community. So it's like, these imaginal cells have the potential and the resonance, which then, like little ripples, can go out. Rupert Sheldrake talks about morphic resonance. So when you have that kind of resonance on a small scale, that ripples out. And this is happening already. It's not like this is a future project. Every place that we are at, all of us, wherever we are living in our homes, our families, our communities, our nations, our planet, we are building these resonant fields. So this is just one more step towards that, but also with an emphasis, a very strong emphasis on building the light body. So doing the practices necessary for this to happen. So people being drawn together with that intention to create Homo Luminous, to create Gaia Luminous. What's Gaia Luminous about? So we're being instructed by her rather than imposing an idea of where we're going. We listen, we open, we allow, and then something deeper moves through. So this to me is what the indigenous people have been exploring, and that's why their lifestyle has been so sustainable for thousands of years. So the Gaia's guardians or Gaia's gardens that we've been talking about is basically choosing to become sustainable once again as the new human. So we're in an age of transition. We can't go back. We're moving forwards. But what are we moving forwards into?
Excellent. That's fantastic. We do have a question. How can we find out more about the communities that you're speaking about?
It's still in process. So
It sounds
once
like
we
we
get
need to allow the process to flow through organically.
Yeah, well, there's certain, what we're looking for right now is the infrastructure. So we have some land in different places. We have quite a base of finances. So there's a lot of people, there's billions involved in this. So it's not a small thing. And the next thing would be to have people who are responsive to that call, which includes all of you. If you have access to places, if there's land available, which you think would be useful to create a Gaia's garden, we can look at that. We can find ways that we can come together and build. So that's what I mean is in process. The vision is there, but it takes all of us to step into that vision together. So I'll
Definitely,
certainly
indeed.
keep you informed as this develops.
That's fantastic. Obviously, really along the lines of connecting consciousness vision of these healing centers all over the planet. And I would think I was speaking about this earlier today. And, there's so many organizations and so many different people, working towards the same goal. Collaboration and cooperation is so key here. If we can get the right people around the table, if we can have these conversations and we can build some of these resources, we can really, really start shaping these centers or these Gaia gardens, whatever name you want to call it. It all operates with the same intent of healing and of love. We all want the same thing here. So absolutely, Kiara, if people are if they have the resources, if they have some other experience in this kind of development, we're always looking for people that can help out, that can put forth an effort. Everyone has a part to play in this process, and I'm very, very grateful that we're able to share this today, for sure.
And I'd also like to say that
Sure.
Since connecting consciousness is very deeply associated with Simon Parkes and his vision, he's talking about coming to Scottsdale, Arizona, and creating healing centers, working with medical technologies, including the med beds, because we're working with a political agenda as well as a spiritual personal agenda. So how do we create communities which can have that focus? So maybe like where some people may be gravitated as healers or as authors, writers, activists, but finding support so they can feel financially supported, emotionally supported to do this larger work. It's much harder to do this when you're off by yourself. So finding a team of people that you totally fully resonate with in this bigger picture. So we're going beyond the little self here. We're entering into that realm of the planetary self. And from that space, how can we support each other in building the new earth? So, what I see of Simon is that he's really been holding that vision, and that's really what this connecting consciousness community is about worldwide. So I've never met him, I've never spoken with him, but I'm really eager to connect directly with him at some point as well.
Excellent. Well, that's what we are trying to do here. We are about connecting the consciousness together. Just today, right now, we're connected literally all over the planet. We are holding the light all over the globe at this moment, from coast to coast in Canada and all the way to India. This is super, super special. We are embodying it right now. We are actually manifesting it as we speak. It's hard though when we can't see it in front of us. It's that work. I'm a child and youth worker by trade, and so many times, working in the group home or in a school setting or in even office space, you're working with children and families, and you don't see the results of your work the next day. You don't see it in a couple months. What you do, what happens is you're working at the house, and they come back 10, 15, 20 years later, and they talk about the stories about this time and how you impacted their life. And that is just it. We have to be so patient, because the work that we're doing now is putting forth some wonderful, wonderful, beautiful things in the future, and we have to do so together. Stop with this separation, like you opened up with. This separation that has been occurring for, we talked about thousands of years. It's been here a long time, and like you said, never before, in this kind of realm, we've have been connecting together, and empowering everybody, strengthening everybody. There's a wave happening that if we're not careful, we're going to get washed up too. It is super, super strong, super powerful. And I'm really excited to be a part of this. Absolutely. Before we close tonight, David, do you have any final words?
Yeah, I agree with all. And it's a very, very exciting time. I'll just close with one little paragraph here I'm just scrolling through my phone to just sort of find something of blossom to finish with. And this is from At the Feet of the Master. It's a wonderful book. It's an easy read, but it's like the Tao Te Ching. You can read it in 15 minutes, but study it for a lifetime. Mm-hmm. So I read, and I'll close my account with this today. As it relates to walking the path, you must be so filled with the intense desire of service that you are ever on the watch to render it to all around you, not to man alone, but even to animals and to plants. You must render it in small things every day, that the habit may be formed, so that you may not miss the rare opportunity when the great thing offers itself to be done. For if you yearn to be one with God, it is not for your own sake. It is that you may be a channel through which God's love may flow to reach your fellow men and women. He who is on the path exists not for himself, but for others. He has almost forgotten himself in order that he may serve his fellow man and woman. He is a pen in the hand of God, through which his thought may flow and find for itself an expression down here on earth, which, without a pen, it could not have. Yet at the same time, he is also a living plume of fire, raying out upon the world the divine love which fills his heart.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much, David. Kiara, we talked a little earlier about perhaps doing a closed meditation to finish us off here. I invite you to do so.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. Well, before I do that, I just want to express my gratitude, my appreciation for all of you. What a wonderful community and intention you're creating together. And I, honor that, support that. I'm grateful to be a part of that in some way.
Thank you. That's
Ripples.
no, that's lovely. I'm very happy that you're here with us tonight.
Thanks. Yeah, so this meditation that I'd like to do, um, it's from the Inca tradition, the Andean tradition. And it goes back, many thousands of years, way before the Spanish ever entered into South America. So it doesn't carry that sense of duality, which came after the conquistadors came with their ideas of God and Satan, good and bad and negative and positive. So in the Andean cosmology, like we were saying earlier, the universe is all about flow. You're either allowing the flow or you're resisting the flow. So when you allow the flow, that's called Sami. When you're resisting, it's called Hucha. And on this planet, they say humans are the only species that have the ability to resist the flow. We generate Hucha, uh, which has been the bane of human culture and society for thousands of years because we do not trust something bigger than ourselves, because we have locked ourselves into what they call the middle world, disconnected from the upper world and the lower world. So this meditation practice is about rejoining those three worlds together. So the middle world represents our human psyche. It's the world we experience through the rational mind and through the physical senses. It's our memories from a given incarnation. When we open to the upper world, we're connecting with the world of spirit, which is multidimensional. It's not non-physical necessarily, but multi-layered. And then the lower world is the world of nature, biology, Gaia, uh, the, the web of life that represents nature. So when these three worlds can be brought together within ourselves, then we become multidimensional. So it's actually a very simple practice, but the more we continue working with this practice, the more expanded and multidimensional we become very naturally. So it's not about forcing something to happen. So you'll see in this meditation that it's very much about allowance, because the universe is already in charge. She's already working with us and through us. We just have to allow that, trust that. So we'll start with experiencing a bubble of light that surrounds the physical body. So I'll guide you through this as a guided meditation. All right, so just starting wherever you are, taking a couple deep breaths, inhaling, exhaling, allowing your breath to become a cycle. And as you breathe, becoming aware of this bubble of light, extending about 6 feet or 2 meters around you in all directions. So this is the luminous egg that Carlos Castaneda talks about. Oh, these beautiful filaments of light extending through this bubble, connecting the physical body with the etheric body, with the mental and the emotional bodies. So we are linking the physical planes with the astral realms and the memory field and the emotional field that comprises our humanness. So all of this is the middle world. It's a beautiful world in itself. And now we're going to join the middle world with the upper and the lower worlds. So once you become aware of this bubble, become aware of a window at the very top of this bubble. So about 6 feet or 2 meters over the top of your crown, there's this powerful window that's a gateway into the upper world. And you open it as wide as you can. And so here you're using your intention, and the intention is enough. You don't have to force anything or even visualize anything. It's just the intention. 6 feet above your head, open that window as wide as you can. And immediately what happens is this tremendous force of light starts pouring in. It's an electrical frequency. So imagine that you're standing under a waterfall and this powerful stream comes through you, electrical force. And you're not doing anything, you're just standing there and receiving. And it's a flow of Sami, this electrical force. As it moves through the bubble, as it moves through your physical body, it starts to clear out and release the hucha that we've carried for lifetimes. And it happens by itself, it happens naturally. As the electrical force comes through downwards, it releases hucha down into the earth. Mother Earth receives this with gratitude, because to her it's all about alchemy, transforming hucha into Sami. There's nature spirits and elemental beings whose job it is to transmute this hucha into Sami, into flow. So you can feel this as an energetic process. Just allowing. So it's happening on a level beyond the participation of the rational mind, except just to make that intention and then just surrender. So now there's other levels of the mind, other levels of consciousness that are taking over. And one of the principles within the Andean tradition is the law of reciprocity, what they call Aini, which means that whenever energy flows in one direction, there's always a response in the other direction. So as the Sami pours in from above, this electrical force continues to move down through your feet into the earth as a perpetual flow of light. There's a response from the earth. So this magnetic field or magnetic force starts to move upwards. It comes up from deep within the center of the earth, from the very core of our planet, the heart of Gaia. So when we're talking about the core, we're talking about the causal level, the soul of the earth. And this magnetic force of light comes up through the different layers of the earth, different dimensions or densities of this planet, up through your feet, and then moving upwards through your body, up through the bubble, then moving up through that window and up to the sky. So it's simply a matter of where you put your focus. They're happening simultaneously. You can't open the door to the upper world without simultaneously opening the door to the lower world. So as the electrical force comes down into the earth, the magnetic force comes up back to sky. And part of what we are as human consciousness is an electromagnetic entity. And when we open these doorways to the upper world and the lower worlds, the force of this electromagnetic field becomes much stronger. And through that electromagnetic field extending further and further out, you find that the bubble itself begins to expand, and you begin to contact the causal body, which is the realm of the soul. This is your multidimensional space. So notice that this bubble, which starts off 6 feet around in each direction, begins to stretch and expand naturally. You feel yourself expanding further and further out as these electrical and magnetic forces interact with each other. You connect with the causal body, with the soul. You find that on this level of soul, the separation between the human self and the planetary self begins to dissolve. You find yourself opening further and further out, becoming the planet, becoming one with all the fields of life around you. All the different kingdoms of life, all the different dimensions of life. So you're talking about the mineral, the plant kingdoms, the animal kingdoms. We're also talking about elemental beings who are on a different vibrational frequency and may be invisible to the physical eyes, but are equally real. We're also talking about angelic, archangelic levels of being. Elohim, the lords of time. And as we continue to stretch out, entering into the inner earth, connecting with realms and civilizations that exist beneath the earth, joining with them in consciousness as well. That window continues to get wider. You find yourself extending out even beyond the physical boundaries of this earth, extending out through the solar system, connecting with the soul of the sun and all the different planets within our solar system. This is where those astrological forces take root within you. So the energies of Mercury and Venus and Mars and so on become alive as part of your own consciousness awakening. You find yourself extending even beyond the solar system out into the galaxy, out through the Milky Way, connecting with your galactic body. Each star becoming a single cell within your galactic body. Experiencing your connection with the central sun, the galactic sun, Hunapku. Feeling the powerful fields of information downloading all the way through your multidimensional self. And then expanding even further and further out out through galactic, intergalactic space. When you enter into your cosmic body, every galaxy is a single cell within your cosmic being. Extending out further and further to the boundaries of time and space. And experiencing all of creation within yourself. Here you're connecting with levels of the mind where there's no boundary between inside and outside, self and other. And then finally going beyond the boundaries of time and space. And experiencing yourself as that primordial self, the one spirit moving through all things, beyond all things. I am. This great ocean, I am. And now experiencing this great ocean entering into every drop, every cell, in your galactic body, in your solar body, in your planetary body, in your human body. Everything is just a flow. Of magnetic and electrical forces intelligently interacting with each other. In this great playground of life. So the same I am that's present in your universal experience of self is now present in your human experience of self. So these three worlds join together. In your human experience, the ocean penetrates into the drop. You feel the power of the entire universe available and present. You feel the wisdom, the love, the beauty of all that is here and now. Right here on this planet, on this earth, entering into the field of life to make a difference. Feeling the gratitude that we can be here at this time, be here in this space as descended masters. So all you're doing is keeping that window open as wide as you can, and everything else just happens. And as Hucha continues to release, the magnetic frequencies coming up from the earth, frequencies of love, acceptance, comfort, nurturance, and joy, begin to fill every single cell within your body. Opens your heart to all that you are. And this is the frequency that ripples out across the earth. Through the collective consciousness of humanity, through all the spectrum of life, to build the new earth. External events respond to this internal foundation of being. And that's one reason things have been moving so rapidly forward at this time, because there's so many millions of people on this earth right now who are learning to hold this vibrational frequency through their biological structures. So thank you for participating, for being here, for being present, for joining together. Thank you, Philip, for this glorious invitation, and to all the Connecting Consciousness members for taking on this project, for building the new earth together. And thank you, David, for being my partner in crime. So you might find that you can just keep that window open in the midst of your daily activities, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Just keep coming back to that window, inviting that window to be open as much as possible. You'll find that it will close by itself when there's too much light in the body. So it's not going to push you over your limits. And the more you intentionally allow that, the more multidimensional you can maintain your presence. I also want to express my gratitude to the to my Inca teachers, and to all the indigenous people across the earth who still maintain Gaia's vision in such a profound way. And all of us who are listening and waking up now.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. Words can't express. Words can't express. They should have sent a poet. Uh, thank you. Thank you, Kiara. Thank you for that. Thank you, David, for holding the light and being the white knight as well. You are doing a fantastic job, and in tandem with Kiara, both of you are creating a wonderful, wonderful world that we want to be in. And together, all of us here are creating a wonderful, wonderful world that we are all wanting to see. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Please check out David and Kiara on Above Duality on their program there. The link was put in into the chat. It's probably pretty buried by now, but please check them out. Like David said, he's going live in not too much long from now. So please check them out, and I will see you next time here. I don't have the date in front of me. It's gonna be in March. The second Thursday in March, we'll be back here for a national Zoom. But we have so many other gatherings happening that we've talked about earlier, and hopefully you'll be able to catch, if not one, then maybe a couple. Thank you, everyone, for holding the light. Allow the love to shine. Allow the healing to be. Allow. Allowance is the word of the day. Thank you all so much. I love you all. We'll see you next time.